much. How many of you have heard of AmerisourceBergen? Just raise your hands if you could. Good. If you see anyone at my company, down there is my tie. I was at this event with a tie, okay? So just want to get that out. How many of you are involved in pharmaceuticals? One over here, another one back here. Good. So this will be a good learning experience, hopefully, for the majority of you. As he said, Jeff Denton. I've been with AmerisourceBergen for 35 years, a little more than 35 years. No, I'm not retiring yet. My 12-year-old won't let me. And I've been involved in both the business side as well as the IT side. The majority of my career has been on the IT side. But I work very, very closely with the business throughout the years. So I'm not all business and I'm not all tech. A little bit of a twist for you guys in this conference. But I wanted to go through a little bit about what blockchain might mean to ABC. And to do that, I need to introduce ABC a little bit. So this is not a sales pitch, but rather to help you get some grounding, a little background, if you will, on the supply chain in pharmaceuticals with the distributor as I fit in the middle of that supply chain. So I'll talk a little bit about who we are. I'm going to stand out here because this always makes me nervous. Some use cases that we are going through today in our supply chain, and also talk about some potential blockchain solution and additional use case possibilities. You're going to hear from experts on the panel some varying perspectives about blockchain technology, and that's what we really want. We want to get that out and understand how that's going to fit for AmerisourceBergen and for our supply chain. But AmerisourceBergen is made up of basically 4 different entities. We have drug distribution. It's about 80% of our business. We're a little over $160 billion a year in revenues. And that again, is about 80% of it. That's just pure distribution. Drugs coming in, drugs going out to the pharmacies and the like. Specialty group is more around some of the biosimilars, the vaccines, oncology supply, and those type of drugs. Very highly specialized. And there's, of course, a more urgent need for that distribution of those drugs to be very, very timely. Many of those go out by private jet when needed for some of the therapies that it's providing. Animal health, we recently acquired them a couple of years ago, kind of brought 90 million new patients to what we provide services for. We're the only wholesaler in the US that provides distribution of products for both the consumption of animals as well as our companion animals. And then global sourcing and manufacturing. We do a lot of work with manufacturers, particularly around introduction of new product to get it out there as quickly as possible for the patients that could take advantage of it. We also do a lot of work with them in helping to ensure that the drugs that they provide are advertised, and I don't want to use that word loosely, but that our pharmacists, who often are heads down filling prescripts all day, understand what's on the market and what their application is to help them better serve their patients. So this slide here is just the distribution piece, about 80% of our business, as I said. I'll give you some updated numbers a little bit. But generally, we have 40,000 customers that we ship product to 5 days a week. So the model is they order up to about 9 p.m. local time, wherever they are, and then it's delivered about 85% of that before 8 a.m. the next morning. 5 days a week, starting Sunday night picking through Thursday night. We have about 130,000 customer calls per month. And in our business, that's very, very important because they're not calling because they have nothing else to do. They're calling because they need the drugs for their patients. And they're working very hard to service those patients. So we have a huge call center that manages their calls and is able to facilitate their needs. 156,000 cases received every day. So our model is we bring in product in case quantities, 12, 24, even 144 if it's lip salve, and we pick individual units out of those cases to ship outbound. We do that by putting the product in a tote. A tote represents an order. And we ship out 160,000 totes every day to our pharmacies. So the volume is large, and I think that's what I wanted to try to project here. We're only 1/3 of the market in the US when it comes to distribution. 99.9% of all products in the pharmacy space goes through a distributor. We have two large competitors, almost even keel with the amount of drug distribution that we do. And then there's 6 or 7% among another 30 wholesalers. So it's very important that we uphold our responsibility in the industry to ensure that we are satisfying the needs of the patients and, of course, the caregivers that are working with them. We have about 25 distribution centers in the US, but we are global. We have offices in 56 countries now. We ship product in 126 countries. A lot of that is through a company called World Courier that we have, and it fell in our specialty space in the previous slide. They distribute a lot of product for clinical trials, another service for manufacturers that we help to ensure that we facilitate. So what's our dilemma today? Our dilemma is counterfeits around the world are out of control, mostly in South America and Asia, and certainly in the African nations. We are lucky in the US that we do not have a prevalent problem. But the intention is to make sure we don't get there. And with the drugs continuing to go up, it becomes a bit more advantageous for many of the bad actors to try to get into the bad counterfeit market. So the US government passed a law back in 2013, became effective January of 2015, and is progressively increasing in the amount of requirements that we have to facilitate over the next 10 years. So it's unlike all the other regulations, it was kind of once and done. You met it and you moved on. Not this one. You meet it and you keep having additional dates where you need to add complexity in the supply chain to ensure security of our drugs. The US is different than all of the other countries around the globe in our law. All the other countries have a centralized database. So when products are shipped by a manufacturer, they post data to a central database. When anyone else downstream in the supply chain handles that drug, they're able to go to that central database and check its authenticity. And they do that by way of what we call a serial number. And I'll have some slides a little bit later to explain that. Today, all the pharmaceuticals that are being distributed are primarily managed by lot number. It could be 10,000, could be 100,000 bottles produced under that one lot number. And when you have two of the same bottles out of that lot number, you cannot distinguish one from the other. With the serial number, we're able to now uniquely identify each and every unit. And that's what's going on around the globe as well as in the US. But globally, all those individual identifiers are in a centralized database. In the US, we didn't do that. We said, no, manufacturer, you produce it, you identify all the product in an electronic file, and you hand it off to the next person in the supply chain, and which is typically a distributor. And distributor, when you get it, you take that same information and you pass it on to your pharmacy. And then our law in the US stops at the receiving door of the pharmacy. So they don't have to check that number when they dispense it, but they must check it when they receive it. Ultimately, in 2023, the Holy Grail, when all these regulations that we're meeting come together as one. It's an important factor for us that we are different than the rest of the country or the world. And I can't sit here and argue one way or the other because there's no win to that argument. It is what we have, and that's what we have to work with. So that was passed by Congress. The FDA is responsible for ensuring that it's carried out, and we're working very closely in our industry with the FDA to implement something that makes sense. It has to meet the letter of the law, but it also needs to allow our throughput, our performance, if you will, for pharmaceuticals to continue to move through the supply chain. So specifically on the bill, as you see on the slide, there's two titles. The first one I won't talk about. That has to do with compounding drugs. We do that as well, but the biggest part is the second one, Title II, DSCSA. And you'll hear that term a lot as I speak. DSCSA is just the acronym. And what I wanted to focus on first and foremost today is where we are today. I won't focus on what we've already delivered back in January 2015 and beyond, but what's our next hurdle? This November, all manufacturers must serialize the product when it comes off of their manufacturing line. It was set, as you see by the date on the slide, for last year. Our supply chain was behind for many, many factors: cost, complexity, availability of service providers around the hardware and software that's needed. Just couldn't meet it. One of the larger manufacturers, Teva, for example, has over 200 manufacturing lines, over 500 contract manufacturers outside of their company performing manufacturing services for them. So you can imagine the daunting task to try to deliver towards some of these timelines, and it just wasn't possible as an industry. So the FDA gave enforcement discretion. They said, okay, folks, you get one more year. So November 27 of this year, all product manufactured has to be serialized. No one is doing anything with that serialized information yet. In fact, the law says, serialize it now, but you don't have to provide data on it downstream until 2023. So they kind of have a bit of a time to get the packaging line up to play and then start capturing data and sharing it by 2023. There's 4 data elements in this barcode. You see it there. It's a 2D barcode that's required. It's mandated for those individual bottles. It's also mandated at the case level. So a case of 12 products has 13 unique identifiers, one each for each bottle in it and one for the case. We also have what we call inference and aggregation. So in the electronic data that we get, we expect to know the one case identifier and the 12 associated children. Okay? Those are the 4 data elements you see there. Global Trade Identification Number is a GS1 standard. It is used globally. It is part of almost every one of the current regulations globally. It certainly is in the US. And it basically is our national drug code with a labeler code that represents the manufacturer and a check digit. Serial number, 20 characters, 20 digits, alpha only, numeric only, and it is established by the manufacturers. Some of them select those numbers randomly. Some of them create a list. They don't really publicize how they do that for obvious reasons. The lot number is still important, and then an expiration date, which is interesting because the 2D barcode that you see there will have an expiration date of 00 for a day, 12 for a month, and 2020 for a year. Now, how many of you were born on day 00? I don't see any hands, right? Their electronic data that they're producing to accommodate or to accompany that has an actual day, 31st of the month, not 00. Well, electronically, that doesn't match well. They also have to be human readable. You see that down there beside the 2D barcode. In case there's a scratch or a smudge or something you can't read the 2D, you can at least get the human readable. Human readable doesn't have a day at all. Yeah, but electronically, we're supposed to match all this. So that'll be fun. But that's the dilemma before us right now, is meeting the 2017 requirements, which is simply, again, manufacturers have to put a serial number, as you see demonstrated there, on a bottle and on a case. So there's the full spectrum of the law, and you can see in the red where we are today, as I mentioned. So we've had a number of regulations already implemented, and we have a number ahead of us. 2023, again, is the Holy Grail. Product is serialized, data is flowing nicely through the supply chain, and everybody's happy, right? A lot of data. We receive 4 million units of product a day at ABC. We ship out 4 million units of product a day. And now we have to track all that at the individual unit. 2023 is going to be very, very interesting. A lot of data. These are our business units. Down the left, you see the various dates of requirements that are coming about as a result of DSCSA. Across the top, from left to right, are different business units within ABC that has some involvement with distribution of product. All the check marks show where we're impacted. So besides just distribution, we also have repackaging. We have manufacturing with a concern in Ireland and all the CMOs associated to it in India. We have 3PL with over 100 clients that we're managing most of their data for them, as well as the movement of their product. So it's quite impactful to ABC. You could go to any of the other large wholesalers and see something very similar as far as an impact. So we're more than just a distributor, and every aspect of the law impacts us. So we look at this as an opportunity. We could cry over the problem, and we did already. We dried our tears, and now we're looking at what's our opportunity. Serialized product information has to be available. We know that. How do we get it there? How do we know it's accurate? When the person that receives it, how can they trust what we have given them? And then what do you do when it's not right? That's the bigger piece, the bigger scare for me. There are standards involved in this. I've mentioned GS1 with the G10, the serialized number. We have standards on what the data file should look like as you pass it amongst your supply chain partners. Today, for those that we have worked with that can produce it, they're not following the standards. And you all know when you have high volume of data, if you don't follow standards, it fails almost immediately. So we're working really, really hard to get that changed. This is a pharmaceutical supply chain problem. It's not just ABC, it's our entire industry. And if we don't get it right, it becomes a patient problem. And that's the worst scenario that can happen, where supply chain is stopped and the drugs aren't available to your pharmacist at your retailer or to the practitioner who's trying to deliver and administer those drugs to the patients. So we can address the issue with traditional data chain exchange. We've already done that. We've gone through pilots. Traditional data exchange can work. But is it the right way? We've done that for years with invoicing and returns and all kinds of things. Is that really the right way? I know I've been involved in it for 35 years. Traditional exchange of data through EDI, heavy burden on your systems, costs that continue to escalate. Is that really the way we want to go? We can. We've proved it. But it's not what we think is the right way. There's a demonstration on how the 2D barcode would be represented on the bottles and on the cases. Now, an interesting thing about the bottles, I don't know if you are aware of it, we distribute typically a bottle of 100 of our drugs. The manufacturers produce it in bottles of 100, maybe 150, maybe 500. We give that to the pharmacist, and you've probably all seen it where they sit there and they count them all out in a little tray. You need 20, okay, I'll get this bottle of 100 and give you 20. That means that unique serial number applies to multiple prescriptions. And it's kind of interesting because around the globe, you're only going to get a box shipped, manufactured and shipped in a unit of 10 pieces, 10 pills. The US is the only country around the globe that distributes larger quantities and then breaks it down for prescriptions. You can't go to Europe and buy 100 Tylenol even, let alone get 100 hydrocodone, which I did when I had back surgery 2 years ago. Not once, but twice in 1 week, they gave me 2 prescriptions. It's crazy. But that's how it's represented there. Then they have the case label. Here's our dilemma today. For 2017, I talked about. That's returns. Sellable returns. 58 million units of drugs, these bottles of 100 or more, are shipped out to a pharmacy, to a nursing home, to a hospital, to a clinic, and returned. The product's good. They never opened it. All the tamper-evident tape, everything's still good. The bottle's clean. And we take it back, we interrogate it, we give credit to the pharmacy, and we put it on our shelf to pick with the next order. For ABC, that's $3 billion a year of product. So now we have this law that says if you have a return, you have to verify the serial number starting in 2019. Now remember, data doesn't have to be shared until 2023. So I get this bottle back from a pharmacy. I have a unique serial number on it. How do I know that serial number is valid, or is this a counterfeit drug? Which, by the way, returns for legitimate wholesalers is the only avenue we have to possibly insert bad drugs in the supply chain. So 58 million units across all of the industries. As I said, for AmerisourceBergen, it's $3 billion, about 16 million units for us. Manufacturer said, oh, well, you get it, just give us a call. That's not feasible, and they wouldn't have enough staff to respond. The law says, oh, you got 24 hours to answer to that wholesaler. In the meantime, that drug is out of the supply chain. It's not put back in inventory, and I'm rebuying it. So what we do in returns is we take it, whether we get 50 bottles in a return or one, we process them locally in our distribution centers, one bottle at a time. All of us do. We close out the complete return process on a bottle and then go to the next one, even if it's the same product. So that's our dilemma. How do we keep up that ratio of drugs coming in and being processed every day? The only way we can do it, now that we have to check that serial number, is to have sub-second response to a request. An electronic request, a message that goes out to the manufacturer and says, I got this, is it okay? And they come back and say yes or no. Sub-second, from the time I scan it in my receiving process in returns to the time my system has processed the response. Sub-second. It's the only way we can handle that kind of volume. I got to get all my returns out today. I got a whole truckload of them coming tomorrow. So they can't pile up. That's the biggest dilemma that we're trying to solve today. We're not just focused on that, because we know we have 2023 coming as well. But how do we manage this verification, if you will? We call it verification returns. Well, we come up with some other use cases that are going to occur in 2023. Here's 5 of the predominant ones that involve trading partners. What if I get 10 cases on an order of 9? What if I get an order in my receiving doc, but I don't have any data? The law says you can't take it if you don't have data. What if I accept that case, and I accept through inference what you told me was in that case, but I break it down and start picking individual units, and I say, wait a minute, that's not one of the 12 you said was in that case. All these exceptions will bring our supply chain to an absolute halt. We're expecting, on average, 7,000 of them a day. How do you handle that? This is big volume, and it involves going outside of our 4 walls to resolve. That's our dilemma. So, is this the answer? This is a very rudimentary slide. Blockchain is what we're looking at as a potential way forward through both the verification of returns in 2019 and the sharing of data when we have exceptions in 2023. Is that the way to go? I don't know. We are currently at ABC utilizing what I call a client, an enterprise client. It's SAP's ATTP, or Advanced Track and Trace for Pharmaceuticals. That's my client. I've got all these business units lying underneath it, and all they do is scan product. No intelligence whatsoever down below. It's all within ATTP. So I've got a client I could connect to a blockchain, and every blockchain has to have a client. From all evidence so far, it looks like I'm going to have my own node. Okay. That means I got a lot of data. But there's open questions. What about third-party providers? What about who else is hosting a node? Are they following some kind of governance that doesn't exist yet? Will they follow it? If it does, we already see that standards are a problem. How many blockchains are going to be? Can we stand up back and say there's only going to be one blockchain that's semi-private for healthcare? I don't know. And in my experience of 35 years, there's never one of just anything. A manufacturer or a practitioner may have one of something, but as a distributor, we've got to satisfy everyone who has something different. So is there one blockchain? How do two blockchains work together? What if they are fundamentally different in their architecture? Don't know. Maybe some of our experts here can speak to some of that. SAP is working very hard on this same subject that we're working with as well. There are many other groups out there that are working on this same subject. If we have governance, who's going to manage it? Who's going to listen to it? Who's going to follow it? As independent service providers for blockchain, you don't have to. Get a large enough customer base, you can do whatever you want. So these are the things, the questions that are out there that concern me. I am convinced blockchain can manage and do what we need to do to satisfy these problems that I've spoke about. It's big data, it's lots of data, it's data shared between trading partners. What better use case is there for blockchain? But there are a lot of questions that must be answered before it can be implemented. And then what about my trading partners who aren't going to use blockchain at all? How can I continue to use blockchain only and have that interaction with my trading partner who isn't? A lot of questions to be answered. Here's some additional use cases outside of the regulations I was talking about that we have out there as placeholders to look in the future. Again, where it's big data being shared between trading partners, and it's just data, right? It's just data. Can we find a better way to manage this? Procurement is one of the obvious ones. Sales data management. We share sales data with all of our manufacturing partners. Is there a better way with blockchain to do it than a traditional EDI file every day? I think there is. And then one big one for us is chargebacks, which is something that is in many industries perhaps a little unique for us, but it's very large when it comes to volume of data. Product pricing, it's not a secret. Catalog pricing for pharmaceuticals is published on the internet. But it's a basis for all of our transactional activity. Can we use blockchain as an alternate? Clinical trials is one of the big ones. In fact, Amgen and some others are really looking into it hard and have been for a couple of years. I think there's a lot of applicability there. And of course, shipments itself. Excuse me. Here's the dilemma. To utilize blockchain in any of these other areas of our company is going to require significant business process change. And when you're talking about a lot of this being in the financial area, there's resistance. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that. The resistance from the business to change anything. What they have is working fine. What they have, they can do well. And what they have, they can explain very well. Introduce something new, they're all thumbs, like most of us. So we have to convince them. And we have to show them that this makes sense and can dramatically reduce the complexity in their operations that through the years they have built up. People sitting over here, no one knows what the hell they're doing. Another group over here, no one knows what they're doing. The two don't know each other. They're all in the same finance group or purchasing group, or you name it. We don't need all of that complexity, and I believe blockchain is the answer to that. But we have to meet our regulations first. We'll get into these over time. So that's my spiel. I hope it was of value to you. I'm open for questions when we get to that part. One use case for one industry. I know there's thousands of more out there. So thank you.